Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's podcast. I'm H.A. Conrad, here as always with my intrepidly intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Ahoy, Conrad.
Ahoy there. So we are talking this week about the live action version of Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead, which was, a sort of I would say a compilation, or they did a little bit of tweaking in terms of like what the graphic novel was. I'd liken it to a lot of the ideas that they kind of did with Walking Dead, and I have to say I kind of agreed with a lot of the decisions that they made here. But looking forward to talking with you about that. But before we get that, a couple of little news tidbits, that is, not Timbits, tidbits. So
Tim's everywhere are relieved.
Tims are relieved. I mean, if it was, it would be in line with our theme. But
Potentially.
so Will Smith was talking a little bit about his the basically the I Am Legend sequel. And for those of you who haven't sort of seen a little bit of this, basically there was like an alternate ending to I Am Legend, and that is a little bit of the premise by which they are able to do a sequel with him in it.
We've talked about this before
Yep.
on this podcast, but it is absurd that this is where they're going. It's also absurd that they painted themselves into this corner.
Yeah.
But they have. And so Will Smith, though, what was interesting about this to me is that he's at the Red Sea International Film Festival in Saudi Arabia talking about I Am Legend 2, or whatever he's going to call it. There isn't a lot of detail here. He's just like, all I can say is Michael B. Jordan is on board and we have the
Yeah.
script. Like, that's it. So
Um,
that's not exactly a done deal, but I don't know that Will Smith has a lot of projects that fall apart, because I guess he can just prop them up if he wants to.
yeah.
I mean, you could say that about Brad Pitt. I mean, he's got Will Smith money, one would assume. I don't know. Maybe that's apples and oranges, but you would have thought that someone like Brad Pitt could keep that movie on the rails if he put his mind to it.
Right. I will also say Will Smith was so like deeply attached to this particular film. People like he's beloved. And basically he's like, well, I know my character dies, but with the alternative version of it, we're gonna go with that mythology. And other than that, Michael B. Jordan is in it, and that's pretty much all anybody has said.
I like this line here where he's like, you have to be a real I Am Legend buff to know this. But in the first movie, my character dies.
I know. It's like, well, you're based an awful lot on this said alternate ending. But anyway,
it's been enough years. It's been what, 14 years more since that movie came out.
The other thing is, like, let's be honest, there could be an entirely new audience that doesn't really care about the original.
Exactly.
So I think that they're banking on that, and I can't say I blame them. And if you get Michael B. Jordan in there, you've got the chance to make something new. And so, all right, go for it. I'm very curious to hear more details about it, but very excited that it's happening. So there we go.
I'm excited that they've got Michael B. Jordan committed and a script.
Correct.
Whether it's happening still remains to be seen. I'm much more cynical nowadays, HA, after this past 12 months of studios deleting stuff off of streaming platforms just to save a buck. And now their costs have just gone up because of all the union negotiations. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what the state of the state is. I'm excited for Will Smith's optimism.
Right. And speaking of optimism, there is this very odd article by Screen Rant just about why Morgan should return to the Walking Dead spinoff series, the Rick Grimes spinoff series. And it is like a very detailed and laid out article about the reasons why Morgan should return to this. I don't think that there's any plan for this to happen, but they really want this to happen, whoever authored this article. And I have to say, and definitely not the fault of the actor, but the way that the character was, the Fear the Walking Dead Morgan trajectory was really disappointing overall, in my opinion. I mean, it was one of the best things in the end, in terms of like the things that were okay about the show. But man, even he couldn't pull it all together. And I'll admit to you, I did not ever watch the final piece of the show, so I'm my bad. So I'm talking a little bit without a little bit speculatively just because of what I watched before.
Oh,
But
like where Morgan ends up at the end of Fear? You
yeah,
mean?
I just
Yeah. Well, we
I
stopped watching it, so we don't really get to have too
yeah,
many
so
opinions
maybe
about
there
it.
was maybe there's some amazing thing with him, but
And we've seen like 60% of the content with with Morgan Jones in the franchise, and I'd say more than 60% because I think we've only missed like what 2 seasons of Fear the Walking Dead. So
yeah.
that's kind of critical. We do know from headlines that he ends up back in Atlanta area because he gets to go home and shoot his wife. I think is one of the things he does before the end of his story arc. I didn't know if he died or stayed or was alive at the end, but I guess he's alive. I see zero reason to reintroduce Lenny James into this franchise.
Agree.
Too much, too many silly stories have been told through his character. Unfortunately, he's gone insane and come back from insanity 7 times. He was a zombie for half a season.
Yep.
Remember those fun times? Like this dude, they put him through too much. Shambliss and Goldberg, they just put him through too many things. So if you want to maintain like any level of seriousness for the Rick and Michonne show, you keep him as far away from it as possible. That's my 2 cents.
I think, our listeners should read the article, draw their own conclusions, but I'm firmly against this idea. And then lastly, this is your wheelhouse, so I'm going to let you talk about it, although
Oh
it's about something that is beloved to both of us. So,
yeah, Kingdom, the Netflix zombie Korean drama K drama has a spinoff, but it's not what you think. It's a video game and it's a Souls like, and it's available for like early access on Steam right now or open beta. This could be interesting. There's a video trailer on YouTube. Kingdom: The Blood is the name of the game, and there's a boss trailer. I mean, yeah, it's got a lot. It seems to be playing up like hero characters a lot more, like beyond what we were seeing in the show. Granted, you had your characters like the prince and his bodyguard and some other soldiers who were really, really kick-ass soldiers, and then there was that one guy who could shoot and fly through the air. But it's a Dead Souls clone, which is not a game that I'm necessarily drawn to that much. We'll see. Hopefully it does well. I guess that's what I would hope for. That
I hope there are many hats.
I'm sure that there will be many hats.
My favorite.
The art seemed to show a lot of helmets and hats. So
Um,
you might get your wish there.
all right.
And hordes of zombies running at the screen. It was more of a reveal trailer than a gameplay trailer. So I would say if you're interested in games, just keep an eye on Kingdom: The Blood, and you should be able to find more or get involved in the beta that's on Steam right now.
Yep. So all right. Now we get into the main event. So Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead. So this is this is a live action version of the manga, the comic, and we just finished reviewing obviously the animated version of this.
Mm-hmm.
So this is directed by Yusuke Ishida, screenplay by Tetsuro Mishima, and then Akira Mori was the producer. And so this premiered actually just this past summer. Um, and like I have to tell you, I was actually generally a pretty big fan of a lot of the things in this movie.
Hmm.
Um, I thought that they tightened up the storyline a lot, and some of the things that we thought were a little bit tough to deal with in the animated version, I feel like they kind of dealt with that here. There's a couple of points where I'm like, but overall, I thought it was actually a pretty good rendition of this particular storyline. And I felt like I got a lot out of it just because we had seen the animated version.
Yeah. Oh, and the fact that they translated the Japanese,
Yes,
the
and they,
kanji.
they translated the list, which
Yeah.
is, yeah.
Also casting I think was pretty good throughout here. You got playing Akira Tendo was Asako Eiji. he is basically, yeah, like
Is Akira. Like he's really good.
yeah,
Um,
he looks a lot like him even somehow, and he looks like a cartoon character. Not really, but he's just the right level of like his build, his appearance. He doesn't go as manic as the anime character of Akira does, but that's fine, because that was over the top for me. Most of the annoying anime stuff that I was complaining a lot about while we were watching the show, they don't reproduce here, so you don't have to go into his head all the time and flip out, which is what it felt like we spent so much time doing in the anime.
right,
And
but
then
do I mean what they do just visually though is really like hit it out of the park, I think, in terms of the visuals and the editing. Akira's it like whole journey as like an exploited employee at this company, I thought was done very well, and you got the whole sense of what he was going through. Um, in like I thought it was really excellent the way that they managed this.
well,
Um,
it's so close to the
it's so
show
close. It's so close.
that it's like, is that the movie really doing well, or is that the show having really laid good foundation? We both really loved that first episode.
Yeah, and I look, yeah, the show laid great foundations, but I think we've seen examples where even though that might be the case, the live action doesn't live up to what it's supposed to. So I do have to say that I think they did a fantastic job. I also thought that the casting was like amazing. Kasugi, his boss was, I thought, incredibly well cast
Yeah,
and looked.
that's Kitamura Kazuki.
Yep.
He definitely had the face for the Kosugi
Yep.
role, and he tried to do some of that hitting the desk stuff. He just lacked that physicality, I think, that they had
He
in the anime.
did.
That's almost impossible to do. That's like
Kind of
Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Negan are not the same size.
hard.
So that's just too bad. And you know what? That has me a little worried looking ahead. Red herring or tangent here, HA. Last of Us, the video game, the second video game, has a character who is like super jacked,
Mm.
and a female character who is super jacked. And it's kind of, it does come into play in the video game. It's part of her character. I'm really hoping that they can find someone who can represent that. And it's when you're dealing with source material, some things are superficial and you don't really have to worry about it. Kosugi, the guy who played Kosugi, he's not big, but he still is scary. He's got scary eyebrows, I would say.
He's
So,
scary, but
so
he's still commanding, so he
yeah,
manages to pull off the things he needs to do with this character.
just
And
like a lot of physical um tension from the anime, though, right?
yeah,
Like you were always worried that guy, he was mad. He was like twice the size of
he
Akira.
was massive, and like he threw his weight around a lot, literally. And so there was that. But I felt like this character got the psychological intimidation down, and
Yes, I definitely agree.
the actor who plays Akira is, quite, I don't want to say he's slight, but he's thinner and a little
Yeah,
bit smaller physically. So I think it worked.
yeah,
And so much of it is psychological that I think that they managed to pull that off.
yeah.
The other thing I would say is that the makeup and the zombie transformation I thought was really effective.
Dude,
Um,
Otori's transformation that happens
he
like right
was,
on in front of you. She
I was like,
I
wow.
I was
I
like, did
knew
they
it.
put green screen veins on her? And like, I don't know how they did that. I wish I could see behind the curtain.
But also the physicality of it, because she's like, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how they did it, but I mean,
Oh,
and we
there
see,
had to be wire work in
oh yeah,
there.
there's definitely wire work, but even if there is wire work, she had to have such like this was an incredible transformation, and the sound effects were really good. I thought that the whole, and again, they made these decisions like instead of having her kind of already zombified by the time he gets there, we get to see the transformation. We get to see him put together the puzzle. We don't have him aware of the fact that she's been having an affair with the big boss until this point. As in, he knew ahead of this in the animated series, but I still think it was very effective. And they, again, with the editing, they put everything together really neatly, and the transformation was just phenomenal. And as well as like the other scenes where they have, you know, the zombie street scenes and like people running after him, I thought it was really excellent the way that they edited and had this done.
Background actors were really pulling their weight
Yeah, they
too.
were really good. They were clutch. Um and again, the makeup was so good that like, even with the background actors, yes, like you saw like more detail obviously when people are close up and they spend a lot of time on the close-up zombies he's interacting with, but I didn't see any sort of holes in that. You didn't see just sort of normal people running after him, which I thought was pretty good.
Yeah.
I also thought that the set of the apartment buildings was very good. Um, so that was pretty cool. And
In terms of casting for Kensho, did you what did you think of this guy? His name's Yanagi Shuntaro playing Kensho.
so I thought, I guess in my mind and just how he is portrayed in the animated series, he's like a lot bigger than
Yeah.
Akira, and here they have him kind of similarly
Well,
sized.
this is
But
kind of the thing. Everybody is the same size. Like
yeah,
Kosugi is basically the same size as
yeah. But
Akira. So is Kensho. But
But I wasn't bothered because, like, I felt like, again, Kensho had the right attitude, and this actor was great. Like, his face was, like, his expressions and his way of getting things across. Like, I don't think it mattered that much because he really got, again, he got the character down in terms of, like, what the relationship with Akira was supposed to be. And they did not go down the whole naked line with him, which I was really relieved
not
about.
naked even once. Even when he's hooking up with, sort of hooking up with the flight attendants, he's
Right.
still
So I was
wearing
relieved they
clothes.
didn't go down that path, and I fully agree with that decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that made me, I was like, all right, that's all right.
I
But they
mean,
got
I kind of okay. I kind of wish that they had done the jumping across the roof from the Love Hotel to the neighboring building scene. They didn't do when Akira saves him from the Love Hotel. Like
true.
in the animated series, yeah, they're up there. They're like they have a few seconds to get off that roof, and Kensho's having his breakdown about like not having lived up to his potential the same way as Akira is now doing. Where I think he takes off all of his clothes for the first time in this scene, and
Yes.
then tells a joke while he's jumping across the building. Like maybe it's too stupid, but also it kind of set up a nice dynamic where Akira was more badass than Kensho from the outset, and then it kind of goes back and forth with the with the contest to see who can bang a flight attendant.
Yeah.
Which that's that they didn't cut that from the movie, and there were
I
then
was
that among
surprised
a couple
they
of other
didn't put
things.
that, and that's the only part that I'm like, I could have done without that. Um, but I did like I agree, like maybe they should have set that up, but I think they were trying to make the focus Akira instead, and later on you get more of the focus on Kensho, and
Shizuka.
Shizuka.
Yeah,
Um,
so they introduced her really different. Oh, not really differently, I guess, but no, yeah, actually, it was kind of the same, except he goes out not on a beer run.
on a spice
Um,
run,
he's
honestly.
just looking, yeah, he's just looking for steak sauce and salt.
Right.
Why they decided to cut beer from his characterization, not sure. Maybe they thought it was too risky, or who knows. Um, like that wasn't to me one of the more problematic parts of the storyline in the animated series. It was certainly more of the misogyny. uh,
Yep.
so
So
yeah, she gets introduced. Similar shopping scene. There's none of this like I've got a GoPro camera and I'm looking at trucks and I can move Akira out of the way at the last second. It's just more of this like pragmatism, but it's also tinged with a little like selfishness. And we don't get her character as developed as we do in the animated series. I mean, obviously they have less time to work with, but there's none of that backstory about her overbearing father.
right, like we don't have a ton of her backstory at all.
No,
But we don't really have a ton of, I mean, they do have they try to do like the little football backstory with Akira and Kensho. So
there's kind of
with
a lot of that,
with
honestly.
her, it's a little thin. So it would have been nice to have a little bit more to have her background. Um, and that is the other part that I thought fell down a little bit in this. But overall, I was so focused on sort of the editing and how they were moving the story along and in agreement generally with what they decided to do. That I was really enjoying a lot of what they did with this.
Yeah, Shizuka, by the way, played by Shiraishi Mai. and the way that they kind of get them together this time, not at the aquarium,
Right.
although the aquarium still plays a role and a big one.
And I
Uh,
was surprised. Well, we could talk about it, but I was
yeah.
surprised at one part that they did keep, and
Oh
maybe they
man,
were
yeah.
going to do it.
The
I
shark
knew
does the
they were going
shark
to do it.
still plays.
Right.
Not a successful part of the anime, in my opinion, and not a successful. Well, it had moments, I guess, but they changed up a lot, right? Like truck stop isn't happening. It's all happening at the aquarium. Um, but like to get there, they even have that bus of people, which is part of the aquarium episode in the animated series. That just happens like downtown, and they don't actually really save any of those people except for no, they don't save anybody except for
Nope.
Shizuka, who happens
Just
to be
her.
on the bus. I thought in the animated series they actually saved a lot of the people on the bus, right? Because
Yes,
some of
they
them
did.
got killed by the shark, but most of them
Right.
drove away at the end.
Yeah.
Also, the neighbors show up pretty early on in the apocalypse. The
And
neighbors
they
who,
survived.
yeah, and they survived the whole film, which is not something we got in the animated series. So that was an interesting choice. They actually never named them.
Nope.
They just called Mr. Kosaka like Sumire's wife or a husband or something the whole time. Yeah, I don't know. Like, what did you think of them cutting out the parts that they did, or like combining Truck Stop with Aquarium as far as Kosagi's gang went?
Again, I felt like we agreed that something like that should have happened in the animated series. Like, so I actually agreed with a lot of the decision. And, they got away with some of the more weirder aspects. So instead, like, they're not all dressed like a baseball team.
It's just his old company, like Master Shot.
and honestly, they came up with a pretty plausible explanation about why they were at the aquarium, because they made the company a production company, and this is where they got stuck during the whole apocalypse. So I kind of liked that. I also thought that there was like, the sort of little piece where they had resources because they had the fish in the aquarium, though I think there is a plausibility factor here because those things take such an enormous amount of maintenance that without power, I think that would be a hard thing to do. They appear to have power. But I liked how they combined and sort of condensed those storylines a little bit.
They speaking of
They still
condensing, they fit in so many of the bucket list items.
Well,
Like
so
just
that was the thing I thought was really great, was because we still get to have that flavor. And they had a montage scene of some of the bucket list items, and they make this a piece of the little RV trip that our intrepid like trio is kind of going through to get to the aquarium. And I really like that for a lot of reasons, but one is that it actually makes so much more sense to me when Akira is sort of in this weird conflict with himself and like whether he should stay at the aquarium or not. And you believe that he would, listen to them in terms of their bonding and things like that. And I really liked that because it just showed all what they had been through together, and that was kind of fun.
yeah, they really broke down Shizuka's walls a
Hmm.
lot faster through this trip too. One thing that they did that I think was kind of dumb was paragliding. How did they get up in the air? They don't have motors. They must have been in an airplane, or maybe they did base jumping, but they're nowhere near a mountain. So, you know, uh, that was kind of silly. They changed up a couple of the bucket list things. Some of the stuff he did by himself without Kensho, like getting fancy watches, I think, or going shopping without worrying about the cost of stuff. But they showed you every time checking them off, which I did appreciate.
Yep.
Yeah, so I agree that yeah, finding the RV was just like in the street after they got through with the flight attendant element, and they just kind of drove off in it and started their bucket list. But apparently, it was way far away to get to the aquarium because it takes them, I don't know, like the middle of the movie. They're basically on the road to the aquarium the whole time.
Right.
Uh, so at the aquarium, very quickly we are reintroduced to Kosagi, and it's a very similar sort of air or vibe to Master Shot in Tokyo pre-pandemic or pre-apocalypse. Akira really falls very quickly back into the gotta work for Kosagi. What did you feel like? How did you feel like this was put across? It was almost more believable, in my opinion, in the anime.
You thought it was more believable in the anime?
where Akira is like back under the sway of Kosugi.
I don't know. I thought this was believable. Believable enough, but still a little overly dramatic and over the top. I think that, in terms of showing how the people were all like having to put things together, to basically sort of earn their place or keep their place there, I thought that that was pretty convincing. He's so like passive and definitely not the like Kosugi is so dominant here that I didn't find this unbelievable. So I don't know. I didn't mind that piece at all. And I also thought that sort of showing that Kosugi and his higher ups got such more favorable food and things like that to the everybody else, and they showed that a little bit in the animated series. But I thought that that was a pretty powerful message, and that people were so afraid of losing their spots that they weren't going to say anything.
Right.
So I thought that was all right.
It was interesting how they had Kensho. Yeah, Kensho was like gonna say something, and then he's pleaded to by Mr. Kosaka not to do anything about it. For that reason, in the animated series, Kensho was basically just in the RV the whole time, all bandaged up because he'd fallen off his motorcycle when they got basically tire spike stripped. But here he's fine, and so they had to kind of guilt him into being to not doing anything about the situation. I thought that was an interesting way to adjust his character for this scenario. But then Mr. Kosaka is like, "Hey, I'll show you how to get out of here. Here's a parking lot." That was his hot tip. Here's a parking lot. Here's a bunch of cars. None of us are leaving, so you should just take any car you want. But instead, they just fix up the RV, which just had one flat tire, despite driving over a spike strip.
Mm-hmm.
And then they take their case to Akira. Meanwhile, the zombie thing happens almost exactly the same as in the animated series. There's a resource crew comes back with a zombie in the truck, and they let all of the zombies they have in their little barrack, their little like, what would you call that? Like a quarantine area. They let all of them in, and they start to kill everybody.
Right. And then, I mean, obviously they combine the shark
Yeah.
theme with this. And I did think that that was a pretty great way to show it. Shark is a little, the effects are a little like over the top, but I think that's normal for this kind of film. And I actually thought that this was like a much more successful sort of rendition of it, as ridiculous as it was. And it was pretty silly but also kind of fun. And you do get a little bit of that sort of superhero vibe, and the whole teamwork with Akira and Kensho, especially like it's really to me it's kind of funny though because you have Akira in the big shark suit, and Kensho is just out there, nothing on him, trying to like drive
but not naked,
right,
which I think he was in the scene in the show.
right. And then, they have the third party of their triumvirate join in, and she's got like great ideas, and she's very like, I'm not sure if this is gonna work, but we'll get it done. And all the choreography, Chikuza and sorry,
Shizuka, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. And she's just like, I like how they have all three of them very involved in this, and because of their bonding before, it makes like a lot of sense, like their teamwork, as insane and ridiculous as the whole thing is. So I thought that it's silly, but it's a lot of fun. So I was definitely okay with what they did with this. The shark itself, just when it's like running around with the zombie legs and things like that, was pretty funny. So
Yeah. I think it just goes on a little too long. It's like 10
yeah,
minutes too long.
It is they could have cut that down a bit,
Because this
but
movie is 2 hours and 6 minutes. It doesn't need to be. It could have been more like an hour and a half. Would have been
it could
probably
have been.
fine.
Yeah.
Because you can cut this big end boss fight in
I
half.
also thought you could cut a lot of the air hostesses piece of it. I just didn't think that was necessary. But
Yeah,
or
I mean they at least PG it by. I mean they're flirting heavily with Kensho, but they don't actually have sex, which
right.
he
But it's
has.
still
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's silly. It's silly. It doesn't really add much other than in this case, it's a way for Shizuka and Akira to start working together
Right.
because they have to cooperate to get out of that shop, which is not how that goes down at all in the show, and this accelerates that sort of relationship, which is a good thing probably. They
Mm,
also don't introduce Beatrix, which I also fully agree with.
same.
It's nice to go to the onsen without any silliness.
Well, also they kind of combine that a little bit. So it's like, yeah, there's a couple of zombies there, but they don't really have it be overrun. So this is their sort of under the stars onsen, even though it's not quite the same vibe is the one in the mountains, but they kind of do the same thing with it, which I thought was fine.
Yeah,
So,
and
and they didn't make it to Akira's village, but I think that's okay because you can't fit everything into this. And interestingly, I think it's where we thought it should have probably ended in the animated series, or at least sort of condense things into the animated series. So I think this was an obvious place for it to like kind of break off, and they definitely left it open for a sequel. There was like an after credit scene at the end.
it was just, yeah, it was pretty silly, but yeah, not even silly. It was like, why was it even there? It was almost like they'd said cut, and the guy playing Kosugi was picking up things off of the set. It felt like,
Right. That's
I don't
totally
know. Uh, yeah, so they have that still. Remember in the show, after driving away from the truck stop, Shizuka is telling Akira like all his potential future jobs that he could have, and
yeah. Again.
how silly that was. And it's still kind of like that. He's like, well, I guess
Yep.
what am I going to do for work now?
Hmm.
And they're just like, well, maybe you can be a superhero for your job. And they actually all agree and think that that's a great idea and write it down on the list, and then they go on with their day. And I guess that's fine. The manga is still putting out issues, or at least they were until September of this year, I think. It goes beyond what we saw in the show, so I guess there's enough content there potentially to do another movie or another season of a show. And that, I mean, obviously the show felt like it was going to go on again, didn't it? With the montage at the end. This could continue. And my question to you, H.A. Conrad, is if it does, will you watch it?
I probably will. I think it's fun. I guess it depends on if they keep going back to the silliness. Some of the things that I didn't love about it in some of the earlier episodes, they seem to have gotten away from that, but it almost feels like they intersperse it as somewhat like comic relief that I just don't really find very enjoyable or funny. But I'd probably watch a few more of these just to see. I think this is, kind of fun,
Okay.
but that's just me.
Yeah, I'm probably not as into it. I'm not into it enough to want to watch it again or more of it unless there's maybe a tonal shift. I did think it was interesting. If you look at the poster art for this, let me see if I can send you a link. If you look at the poster art for this, it's they make a nod to all those really bright colors,
Mm,
but they obviously don't use those in the zombies are not like um
Technicolored.
Technicolor. Yeah, exactly. There's a link to the art in the chat. Um, so like, yeah, I was wondering how they were going to do that, and I was always kind of curious about what that meant. Other than it was like everything was monochrome until the zombie apocalypse, then everything was really bright, and that was part of Akira's like waking up. But they stuck with the brightness and that those weird shades throughout the series. So I don't know. I was just kind of curious that they make a nod to it, but they are clearly staying away from it. They're not wanting to go all abstract. And the zombies felt dangerous. The zombies felt
Hmm.
like you said, the makeup was not like goofy. It was scary. Like even when he's dyeing his hair and there's a hairdresser like tied to a chair with scissors sticking out of her neck and a bunch of other wounds, she's a scary looking zombie, even though she's like tied up and harmless in a way. They definitely didn't lean away from scariness. Yeah,
Yep.
I don't know. Just some thoughts, idle thoughts. So, unless we have anything else to say, HA, or you, any other parting thoughts?
No, I really enjoyed this. I would watch a sequel if they decided to do it. But a little bit of that is also based on what I guess remains of the animated series slash manga content and what sort of form they would decide to take with that. But as a standalone movie, I thought that this was a lot of fun. So I do think that I personally got more out of it having watched the animated series first. So, if you're really into this kind of thing, I would say watch the animated series, even if I had kind of mixed reviews of it. I just feel like it gave a nice context for the live action film, but I think you could watch the live action film on its own as well.
Yeah.
So, so that's all I have to say. How about you, Stuart?
I yeah, I think I've said everything I need to say about it. It was good. It was good enough. It was fine and good enough. Also, one final thing to point out on the Zom 100 movie: 63% on Rotten Tomatoes from critics and 36% from the audience score.
Interesting.
Yeah. But come back again next time, gentle listeners, when we will be talking about the recently released Chris Parnell. It's not his movie, but he's the only name I can remember from it. As we know it, story, and Pam Grier, who's still alive. The Los Angeles-based story of a writer and his girlfriend and best friend during a zombie apocalypse, I think, is my synopsis of how that movie goes without having seen it.
All right. Well,
where can people get in touch with us, H.A. Conrad?
You know that I don't have that answer. No, people can get in touch by emailing us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. And is it reanimatedpodcast@podbean.com?
It's reanimated.podbean.com.
See, there you go.
Which is where all of our episodes are, and you can get at those whenever your heart's desire. And don't forget to leave us a review. Which, yes, by the way, if you saw our Spotify Wrapped HA that I sent to you, we got a 4.9 on Spotify. That's our average review score, which is pretty nice.
Oh, nice.
People they like us. They really like us.
Well, we like people too. So until next time, thanks for listening and ciao.
Alrighty. Bye.